The wind whispered through the ancient pines that surrounded the village of Blackthorn, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and secrets long buried. Mist coiled around the cobblestone streets, curling like spectral fingers around the lanterns that flickered in the dark. The night was alive with sounds, the distant rustle of leaves, the flutter of wings, and every now and then an echoing howl that seemed to pierce the soul of anyone who dared to listen. Liam adjusted his cloak, pulling it tighter against the chill as he crossed the village square. The scholar had traveled far, his feet sore from days of trekking through winding forest paths and rocky trails. Blackthorn was his destination, a place whispered of in old tomes and spoken of in hushed tones by those who claimed to know its secrets. He had come in search of stories, tales of the supernatural, legends of transformation, and the unknown. But as he looked around at the shadowed faces of the villagers, he sensed an unease that hung heavier than the fog. The tavern, the only building still lit at this late hour, loomed before him. Its crooked sign creaked in the wind, and a flicker of movement in the window caught his eye. Pushing open the door, Liam was greeted by the warmth of a roaring fire and the murmur of quiet conversation. Heads turned his way as he entered, the villagers' eyes narrowing, their expressions cautious. Strangers were rare in Blackthorn. Taking a seat near the hearth, Liam's attention was drawn to a group of old men huddled over their ale. Their voices were low, almost conspiratorial. He caught fragments of their conversation, another one missing, strange tracks, the howls getting closer. It was clear that fear was etched into their words, but before he could listen further, an eerie silence fell over the room. She appeared as if from nowhere, a woman draped in dark robes, her eyes as gray as the mist outside. She moved with a grace that was almost unnatural, and when she spoke, her voice was a whisper that seemed to curl around him like smoke. "You must be new," she said, a slight smile playing on her lips. "Few wander this far into the mountains, especially during these nights." Liam introduced himself, explaining his purpose, that he was a scholar, interested in the folklore of the region. But as he spoke, the woman's gaze never left his, and there was something in her eyes that unsettled him, as if she could see beyond his words into his very thoughts. "You seek stories, then," she mused, her tone almost mocking. "But not all stories are safe to tell. Some are cursed, like this village, and those who dig too deep may find themselves entangled in nightmares." He felt a shiver, the air around them seeming to grow colder. "What do you mean?" he asked, leaning forward. "What curse?" Her smile faded and she glanced around the room, as if wary of unseen eyes. "There are things that lurk in the dark, traveler, and in Blackthorn the dark runs deeper than the night. People vanish here. Creatures roam that should not exist." She paused, her voice lowering to a whisper, "and those who seek to uncover the truth often become part of it." Before Liam could press her further, she stood, her cloak sweeping across the floor like the wings of a raven. "If you are wise, you will leave before the moon rises again." With that, she turned and disappeared into the night, leaving him with nothing but questions and the lingering chill of her words. As the tavern's door closed behind her, the chatter resumed, but the villagers' eyes lingered on him, as if marking him for something he did not yet understand. Liam felt the weight of their stares, but curiosity gnawed at him more than fear. There was truth to these legends, he could feel it. And he was determined to find it, even if it meant facing the darkness himself. He finished his drink, the warmth doing little to ease the sense of dread that clung to his thoughts. Outside, the howls began again, echoing through the night air. They were closer now, and somehow in the pit of his stomach, Liam felt that they weren't just the cries of animals. They were the cries of something much worse. A warning, perhaps, or a call to those who dared to stay when the darkness began to stir. Liam awoke the next morning to the distant crowing of a rooster and the muffled sounds of the village coming to life. The night's events weighed heavily on his mind, the woman's cryptic words echoing in his ears. As he dressed, the chill of the room seeped into his bones, a reminder that Blackthorn was not a place for the faint of heart. Determined to dig deeper, he ventured out into the mist-shrouded streets. The villagers went about their routines, but there was an air of caution in their movements. They exchanged brief, wary glances and spoke in hushed tones. Liam noticed the way their eyes darted to the shadows, as if expecting something to emerge at any moment. He approached an older man, stooped and weathered, who was repairing a fence near the edge of the village. The man looked up, squinting at Liam as he approached. "You're the traveler from last night, aren't you?" the man asked, his voice rough and strained. Liam nodded. "I am. I'm seeking stories, truths if they exist, about the things that have been happening here." The old man hesitated, his hands pausing over his work. "You shouldn't meddle with things you don't understand," he muttered. "But if you're set on finding answers, there's someone you should talk to." He pointed to the edge of the forest, where the trees loomed like silent sentinels. "The huntsman, Gregor. He's seen things. If anyone can tell you about the darkness, it's him." Liam thanked the man and set off, following the narrow, winding path that led into the woods. The forest was thick and foreboding, the canopy above blocking out much of the daylight. Every sound seemed amplified. The crackle of twigs beneath his boots, the rustling of leaves overhead. It felt as if the woods themselves were watching, alive with an unseen presence. After what felt like hours, he emerged into a small clearing. A modest cabin stood in the center, smoke curling lazily from its chimney. Liam approached, knocking on the door. It creaked open, revealing a tall, broad-shouldered man with a thick beard and eyes like flint. "Gregor? What do you want, stranger?" Gregor's voice was gruff, his gaze wary. Liam explained his purpose, watching as Gregor's expression shifted from suspicion to something like resignation. He gestured for Liam to enter, closing the door behind him. The cabin was dimly lit, the walls adorned with hunting trophies and weapons. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across Gregor's lined face. "You seek the truth about Blackthorn," Gregor began, his voice heavy with the weight of old memories. "But truth here is not for the faint of heart. What you call legends, we call survival." He took a long breath, his eyes distant. "Years ago, I was out hunting, tracking a stag through the forest. The night fell quicker than I expected, and the mist came, thicker than any I'd seen before. I heard the howls, different from the usual wolves, deeper, like something more than animal. I followed, thinking it might be a pack." Gregor paused, his hand gripping the arm of his chair. "That's when I saw it. A man alone and terrified, running through the trees. Before I could shout a warning, they came for him. Wolves, but not like any I've seen. Their eyes glowed blue, and their fur was matted with something dark. They tore into him, and I thought he was done for." Liam listened, every word sharpening his curiosity, but a knot of fear tightened in his stomach. And then, Gregor's eyes darkened. The man didn't die. He fought, but not like a man fights. He changed, bones cracking, skin shifting. One moment he was human, the next, something else, something caught between man and beast. He joined the pack. Liam felt a chill run down his spine. "And you believe he was cursed?" "A curse, yes." Gregor confirmed. "It's been here for centuries, spreading through blood. Those wolves, those creatures, they're not animals, they're men, caught in a fate worse than death, a curse cast by the old sorcerer Valamir. The village condemned him long ago, but his magic lives on through the bloodlines. Anyone touched by it becomes part of the hunt." Liam's skepticism faltered, replaced by a creeping dread. "If this is true, how does one break the curse?" Gregor's expression was grim. "There's no easy way, if there is one at all. The curse thrives in secrecy, passed through blood and darkness. To end it, you'd have to confront what's in the shadows. But be warned, scholar, the darkness is not a place where men return unchanged." The fire in Gregor's cabin had burned low, casting long shadows that danced along the walls as Liam absorbed the huntsman's words. The gravity of what he had heard weighed on him. He had come to Blackthorn seeking legends, but the truth, if Gregor's story held any, was far darker and more dangerous than he could have imagined. After bidding the huntsman farewell, Liam left the cabin, his thoughts heavy as he retraced his steps through the forest. The woods, still cloaked in mist, seemed even more foreboding. The sunlight barely pierced the canopy above, creating a dim, twilight world that pressed down on him. The stories of wolves and curses echoed in his mind, and for the first time, he felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. Back in the village, Liam made his way to the abandoned chapel that stood at the edge of town, shrouded in ivy and neglect. Its stone walls were cracked, and its windows, long shattered, seemed like hollow eyes staring out into the world. He had heard whispers about this place, how, centuries ago, it had been the gathering site of those accused of practicing witchcraft. Perhaps, he thought, the answers lay within its walls. Pushing the heavy wooden door open, he was greeted by the musty scent of decay. The interior was dark, the light filtering through the broken windows, illuminating dust motes that hung in the air like suspended stars. He stepped cautiously, the floor creaking under his weight as he explored the chapel's remnants. His eyes swept over the crumbling altar, the faded murals of saints and demons locked in battle, and the overgrown vines that crept through every crack. In the far corner, something caught his attention. A loose stone in the wall, its edge jutting out as if dislodged. Kneeling down, Liam pried it open, his fingers scraping against the rough surface. Behind the stone, he discovered a small chamber, hidden from view. His heart quickened as he reached inside, pulling out a dust-covered book bound in cracked leather. The pages were brittle, the ink faded, but as he flipped through, he recognized the symbols and markings of an ancient grimoire. The text was in a language he half understood, a blend of Latin and an older dialect he had encountered in his studies. He squinted at the words, his breath fogging in the cold air. The pages spoke of transmutation spells, rituals tied to the phases of the moon, and, most disturbingly, a curse that could bind human souls to beasts, forcing them to live as wolves under the night sky. As he read further, Liam found the name he had heard from Gregor, Valamir. The grimoire detailed the sorcerer's life, how he had been accused of practicing dark magic, and how the villagers, in their fear and rage, had captured and executed him. But before his death, Valamir had cast a curse upon those who condemned him, one that would endure for generations. The curse, as described, was designed to be passed through blood, spreading from person to person like a contagion. Liam's fingers trembled as he read the instructions for a ritual that could break the curse. It spoke of a ceremony under a lunar eclipse, requiring rare ingredients: the fang of a wolf, the root of a herb known only as lunar weed, and most ominously, a blood sacrifice made willingly. The text was unclear, its meaning obscured by time, but one thing was certain: it was a dangerous path, one that required confronting the very darkness that had ensnared the village for centuries. Closing the book, Liam felt the weight of its revelations. He tucked the grimoire into his satchel, a sense of urgency building within him. If the curse could be broken, then there was hope, but the risks were high. As he stood to leave, a chill ran down his spine. The air grew heavy, and the faintest whisper seemed to echo in the chapel's silence, a sound like distant footsteps, or perhaps the whisper of an incantation carried on the wind. Liam turned, scanning the darkened corners of the chapel. There was nothing, no movement, no sign of life. But the feeling lingered, a sense that he was no longer alone. Clutching his cloak tightly, he hurried out, pushing the door shut behind him. Outside, the mist had thickened, and the sky, once gray, was now veiled in shadow. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and as the first stars pierced the evening gloom, Liam's resolve hardened. He had the grimoire, and with it, the knowledge to confront the curse. But as the night deepened, he felt the weight of unseen eyes on him. The darkness of Blackthorn was watching, and it would not let its secrets go easily. Liam made his way back through the village, the grimoire's weight heavy in his satchel, as though it carried more than just the pages within. The sky had darkened to an inky black, and the mist clung to the streets like a shroud. Villagers were already retreating into their homes, closing shutters and locking doors. The sense of urgency was palpable. Nightfall in Blackthorn was not taken lightly. He headed to the small inn where he had rented a room. Its warmth and light offered a brief respite from the oppressive cold of the outside world. As he entered, the innkeeper glanced up, his eyes flicking nervously to the door before quickly shutting and bolting it behind him. "Best to stay inside, traveler," he muttered, his voice barely audible over the crackle of the fire. "The moon rises soon." Liam nodded, but his thoughts were elsewhere. Settling at the small desk in his room, he pulled out the grimoire, carefully laying it open. He studied the pages under the dim light of a single candle, tracing his finger over the ancient script. The ritual required not only rare items, but precision and courage. He knew that he couldn't do it alone. He thought of Alara, the woman who had warned him on his first night in the village. Her cryptic words and the strange, knowing look in her eyes made more sense now. She had spoken of the curse and of leaving before the moon rose again. If anyone knew more, it would be her. Determined, he left the inn once more, the chill of the night biting through his cloak. The streets were empty, and the mist had thickened to the point where he could barely see a few feet ahead. The howl of a wolf pierced the silence, echoing through the narrow alleyways. It was closer than before, a reminder of the danger lurking just beyond the village's edge. Liam reached the spot where he had first met Alara. It was a narrow lane bordered by ivy-covered stone walls. He waited, scanning the shadows, hoping she would appear. The minutes ticked by and the air grew colder, but just as he was about to turn back, a soft rustle came from the alley's depths. Alara emerged from the shadows, her eyes glinting in the moonlight. "I warned you," she said softly, "and yet you stayed." "There's more to this than just legends, isn't there?" Liam replied. "I found the grimoire. I know about Valamir's curse, and I know there's a way to end it." Her expression hardened, a mix of fear and sadness crossing her face. "You've read the book then. You know the price." "The blood sacrifice," he said, his voice steady. "But I need your help. You understand the darkness here better than anyone." Alara hesitated, her eyes searching his. "The curse runs deep, Liam. It's not just a story. It's a disease, a hunger that consumes the soul. I've felt its pull." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I've been marked, just like others in this village. That's why I stay in the shadows. The curse has a hold on me, and every night the fight to remain human grows harder." Liam's breath caught. "Then why help me?" "Because there's still hope," she said, a glimmer of determination in her eyes. "If the ritual works, it might break the curse for all of us, but we need to act quickly. The next full moon brings the lunar eclipse, our only chance." She explained that the lunar weed grew only in the forest near an old well, hidden among the ruins of an ancient temple. It was a place few dared to go, a place where the veil between worlds was said to be thinnest. If they were to gather the herb in time, they would have to go tonight, before the moon rose high. Liam agreed, feeling the weight of the decision. Together they set off, plunging into the depths of the forest. The trees loomed above like ancient sentinels, their branches clawing at the sky. The mist grew thicker, obscuring the path, and the only sound was their footsteps crunching over fallen leaves. As they neared the ruins, a cold wind whipped through the trees, carrying with it the distant howl of wolves. The air felt electric, charged with an energy that prickled at Liam's skin. The moon, though not yet fully visible through the canopy, cast eerie shadows that danced and flickered. Alara moved with purpose, her eyes fixed ahead. "We must hurry," she whispered. "Once the moon reaches its zenith, the creatures will awaken. They guard the herb." Liam felt the pulse of fear and urgency mingling. The hunt was beginning, and they had precious little time left. Liam's hands moved swiftly, crushing the lunar weed into a paste as Alara outlined the ritual steps. The wolves, their eyes glinting like cold fire, prowled just beyond the circle they had drawn in the dirt. The moon above grew brighter, inching toward its moment of alignment, the crucial point for the ritual. Every passing second felt like a countdown, the air thickening with tension. Alara sprinkled the crushed herbs into the center of the circle, her voice barely a whisper. "We have to draw them in, keep them at bay until the moon reaches its peak." She held up a small vial, its contents shimmering faintly. "This is Wolf's Bane. It'll keep them back long enough, but it's not enough to stop them if they all charge." The first wolf stepped closer, its snarl a low rumble that sent shivers down Liam's spine. He could see the strain in its eyes, as if some part of its humanity fought to break free, clawing against the curse. Alara threw a handful of the herb-laced powder at its feet, and the wolf recoiled, whimpering as the dust burned its skin. The others hesitated, circling but not yet advancing. "Alara, the moon!" Liam shouted as he looked up, seeing the first sliver of the eclipse beginning to shadow the bright orb. The forest seemed to hold its breath, and the wolves, sensing the shift, became agitated, pacing and snarling. "It's starting," she said, her voice strained but determined. She pulled out a dagger and handed it to Liam, its blade gleaming under the moonlight. "We need blood to seal the circle. It's the only way to draw them in and bind their forms long enough for the spell to work." Liam hesitated, feeling the weight of the moment. "Whose blood?" "Ours." she replied, her eyes meeting his with a grim resolve. A cut, just enough to connect us to the magic. Liam nodded, bracing himself as he made a shallow cut across his palm. The sharp sting was brief, and the warmth of his blood dripped into the circle. Alara did the same, her blood mingling with his on the cold earth. The circle pulsed, the herbs glowing faintly as the magic activated. The wolves paused, their eyes locked onto the circle, drawn to the power emanating from it. The moon continued to darken, the shadow creeping over its surface. Alara's voice rose as she began to chant, ancient words that echoed through the clearing. The wolves howled in response, their cries blending with her voice, and the true battle for survival began. Alara swayed, the exhaustion evident in her eyes as she clutched her side, where blood from a shallow wound trickled down her skin. Liam steadied her, his grip firm but gentle. The air around them felt charged, as if the magic still lingered, a reminder of the power they had unleashed. The moon, now completely veiled by the eclipse, cast a red glow over the clearing, illuminating the motionless bodies of the villagers who had reverted from their beastly forms. The silence was overwhelming. Liam's breath fogged in the cool night air as he scanned the scene. "They're human again," he whispered, a sense of relief mingling with disbelief. It worked. Alara nodded, but her face remained tense, the lines of fatigue deepening. "For now," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "the curse may be broken, but it's fragile. These villagers, they've lived as beasts for too long. The darkness won't let go easily." Liam felt the weight of her words. "What do you mean?" She knelt by the nearest villager, a middle-aged man whose face was familiar. His chest rose and fell, slow and labored. "The magic that bound them to their forms, it's ancient and powerful. We've severed the curse, but they'll need time to heal." She paused, her gaze drifting to the others, and not all of them will remember what it means to be human. A distant rustling pulled Liam's attention back to the forest's edge. The mist swirled, and a chill passed through him. The forest, so silent now, felt like it was holding its breath. "We need to get them out of here," he said, his voice urgent, "before anything else happens." Alara struggled to her feet, and together they began pulling the unconscious villagers into a line, gathering them close. The wolves had been replaced by shivering, naked men and women, their faces pale under the moon's eerie light. Liam felt a pang of guilt as he looked at them, realizing just how many lives had been trapped in this nightmare. The wind picked up, carrying a faint, almost imperceptible whisper. Liam paused, his eyes scanning the darkness. "Do you hear that?" Alara's eyes darkened, her expression serious. "It's the forest," she said. "It knows the balance has shifted." As they worked, she glanced at Liam, her face etched with worry. "We need to leave this place. The curse may have been broken, but the shadows here are restless. They won't let us go without a fight." The dawn light slowly crept over the horizon, bathing Blackthorn in a warm, golden hue. The villagers, still shaken and weak, clung to one another as they began to reorient themselves to the reality they'd been pulled back into. Liam stood, his legs unsteady, as he watched them. Faces that had once been contorted in feral rage now showed confusion, fear, and, for a few, the beginnings of hope. Alara leaned against a tree, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The ordeal had drained her, and the faint light did little to lift the shadows from her eyes. "They'll heal in time," she said softly, "but some will never forget what they've done or what they've become." Liam knew she was right. The haunted expressions of the villagers told him that much. "And what about us?" he asked, looking back toward the forest, its dark depths still holding the remnants of the night's magic. "Can we leave it all behind?" Alara's gaze followed his. "The forest will always keep its secrets, but we've broken the chain. We gave them a chance to reclaim their lives. That's all we could do." As the sun rose higher, more villagers emerged from their homes, their eyes wide as they beheld the group gathered on the outskirts. Families reunited, hesitant and emotional, and whispers spread through the crowd, some of gratitude, others of disbelief. Liam felt a sense of relief, but it was tinged with the knowledge that the scars of the curse would not fade easily. "Liam!" a voice called from the crowd. It was the old huntsman, Gregor, his face pale and drawn but alive. He approached with a limp, his eyes fixed on Liam and Alara. "You've done it. You broke the curse." Liam nodded, but he saw the weight of years in Gregor's eyes, the pain of all those who had suffered and been lost. We broke it, but there's still so much to heal. Gregor gave a slow nod, then turned to Alara. Thank you, he said, his voice rough with emotion, for all you've sacrificed. Alara managed a faint smile. It's not just my fight. It never was. As the villagers began to disperse, returning to rebuild their lives, Liam felt the first real warmth of the morning sun. He exchanged a glance with Alara, and they both knew it was time to leave Blackthorn behind. Where to next? He asked, a small spark of curiosity lighting his eyes. Alara shrugged, a weary smile on her lips. Wherever the stories lead. With one last look at the village, they turned and walked down the path, disappearing into the light of a new day.